Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. Ayanna Carta had always been a giver. Growing up on the south side of Charlotte, North Carolina, she learned early that love sometimes meant putting yourself second. She watched her mother work 2 jobs, always saying yes, even when she was exhausted. Ayanna carried that spirit into adulthood, believing sacrifice made love stronger. When she met Calvin at 22, she thought she had finally found someone who would protect her the way her mother never got protected. He was smooth, smart, and older, already working a good job in finance, driving a black sedan, and wearing cologne that lingered long after he left a room. When he called her baby girl and told her he would take care of her, she believed it was love. And when he said she did not need to worry about work, that he would cover everything while she found her passion, she believed that, too. Slowly, her life shifted. She stopped applying for jobs, stopped teaching the free yoga classes she loved. He convinced her to block a few friends. "They are a bad influence," he would say. And little by little, she became invisible in her own story, just Calvin's wife living under Calvin's roof. The changes came subtly. At first, it was small corrections. "Do not wear that dress. Too much skin. Do not talk so loud when we are out. You do not need to be texting your cousin all the time." Ayanna complied, thinking she was compromising. But over time, compromise turned into control. He decided what groceries they bought, what neighborhood they moved to, what church they attended. She would suggest ideas, maybe opening a small wellness studio or even starting a women's circle. But Calvin would wave them off. "You do not have the head for business. Be real." The words stung, but she smiled anyway. Arguing never helped. It only made him colder. Sometimes he would ignore her for hours after a disagreement, punishing her with silence until she apologized for simply having an opinion. Still, she stayed. Every once in a while, he would buy her a gift, take her out for dinner, whisper, "You are my world." And for a moment, she would believe it again. She told herself it was just stress, just a phase. But deep inside, something began to crack. She felt smaller every day. And yet, she did not know how to leave. She had no job, no savings, and nowhere to go. The breaking point did not come with a fight. It came over dinner, cooked by Ayanna like always, seasoned the way he liked, served on the ceramic plates they received as wedding gifts. They were eating in silence when Calvin reached into his leatherwork bag, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the table. "It is over," he said without looking up from his plate. "Divorce papers." Ayanna blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "What?" she whispered. "I am done," he repeated, chewing like it was just another Tuesday. "This marriage is not working for me. And let us be real, you are nothing without me." The words landed like a slap. He did not raise his voice. He did not offer comfort, just chewed, swallowed, and moved on to the next bite. Ayanna sat frozen, hands trembling in her lap. She did not cry. Not yet. Something inside her refused to give him the satisfaction. She stood up slowly, left the envelope on the table, and walked to the bedroom. She locked the door and slid down the wall, heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. For the first time in her life, she realized just how lost she had become. That night, Ayanna barely slept. She lay curled on the edge of the bed they used to share, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above her. The house felt colder than usual, like the air had turned on her too. She thought about calling her sister Maya, but she had not spoken to her in over a year. Not since Calvin claimed she was too messy to trust. Her best friend Carmen had stopped texting months ago after Ayanna canceled one too many brunches. She realized she had no one left, not because they abandoned her, but because she had quietly pushed them all away for him. The next morning, Calvin acted like nothing had happened. He got dressed for work, whistled on the way out, and told her to take care. The front door closed behind him, and she finally let the tears fall. But they did not last long. Something hardened inside her. She looked in the mirror that afternoon, hair in a bonnet, circles under her eyes, heart shattered, and whispered, "No more." She did not know what came next, but she knew she could not be that woman anymore. Not for Calvin, not for anyone. She had to find herself again. Leaving was not easy. The bank account was in his name. The car title too. Ayanna packed 2 suitcases, took the last $86 from her secret kitchen drawer stash, and left without telling him. She caught a ride with a neighbor to her cousin Shanice's small townhouse across town. Shanice, a nurse working night shifts, did not ask questions. She just opened the door, hugged Ayana tight, and made space. The room was cramped with a fold-out bed and boxes in every corner, but it felt like freedom. For the first few weeks, Ayana did nothing but rest. She slept late, drank tea in silence, and cried when she needed to. Then slowly, she began to stretch again, both physically and spiritually. She joined Shanice for walks, borrowed library books on business, and even helped teach a free Saturday yoga class at a community center downtown. She did not advertise it. She did not post about it. She just showed up one class at a time. Her body felt stiff, her voice shaky at first, but the more she moved, the more she remembered. This was who she was before Calvin. This was the woman he had tried to erase. Ayana found part-time work at a small wellness shop called Earth and Essence. The owner, Ms. Trina, was in her 50s, locks wrapped in colorful scarves, and she saw right through Ayana's brokenness. "You are carrying a storm inside," she said one afternoon while handing her a sage bundle to restock. Ayana did not deny it, but Ms. Trina did not push. She simply gave Ayana hours to work, room to learn, and gentle words to grow into. With every week, Ayana started to move with more purpose. She was making just enough to cover her portion of groceries and bills at Shanice's, but that little income felt like independence. She opened her own bank account for the first time in years. She started saving $10 here, $20 there. Not much, but hers. One day after a long shift, she sat on the floor of a borrowed room with a notebook and sketched out a plan, a small healing space. Nothing big, just a room where women could stretch, breathe, and feel safe. She did not tell anyone, not yet, but the idea glowed inside her like a quiet fire. She wrote the name at the top of the page, Sacred Ground Wellness. Ayana did not rush. She kept working her shifts at Earth and Essence and teaching free yoga at the community center on Saturdays. Each class brought in women of all ages, tired mothers, overwhelmed students, women fresh out of breakups or burnout. And every week, one or two would come up after class and say, "I feel lighter," or, "You do not know how much I needed this." Those small words filled her like fuel. She began hosting sessions in the park on Sundays, too, using mats she borrowed from Ms. Trina and folding chairs from Shanice's trunk. She did not advertise. It was all word of mouth. And slowly the circle grew. One woman brought her cousin, another brought her mother. Each week, they would breathe together beneath the trees, the sun filtering through the branches like a quiet blessing. Ayana still had doubts. She still woke some nights unsure if she would ever feel whole again. But the more she gave, the more she reclaimed. She was not trying to be perfect. She was just trying to be present, and that was enough. For the first time in years, she was living a life she chose, not one she was handed. By the end of the first year, Ayana had saved enough to rent a small room above a laundromat on the east side. The walls were dingy, the floors needed polish, and the ceiling fan creaked. But she saw possibility. With help from Shanice and a few of her students, she scrubbed every inch, painted the walls soft earth tones, and set up her space with thrifted pillows, candles, and mirrors she had collected along the way. She hung a sign above the door, Sacred Ground Wellness. There was no grand opening, just Ayana, a few yoga mats, and her courage. She offered pay-what-you-can classes and left the door open. On the first day, only 2 women showed up, but they cried during Savasana. On the second day, 4 women came, and by the second week she was teaching full sessions twice a day. Still, she kept her head down and stayed humble. No big announcements. Just service. Ayana made enough to start repaying Shanice, even covering groceries some weeks. Her voice grew stronger, her body more grounded. She was not chasing success. She was building safety for herself and others. And in that process, she became someone even Calvin would not recognize. Meanwhile, Calvin's life did not unfold as smoothly as he had expected. After the divorce, he started dating again, assuming he could replace Ayana easily. But the women he attracted did not stick. They were not impressed by his job title. Some were turned off by how he talked about his ex-wife. "You let her sit at home all day and you are upset now?" one woman asked bluntly. His job began to wear on him too. The company merged with a firm in Atlanta. New management started tightening policies. Calvin, who had once walked around like he owned the building, was now just another mid-level manager with outdated ideas. When he was laid off 18 months later, he did not tell anyone, not even his family. He moved into a cheaper apartment, sold his car for something modest, and began applying for work online. No one was calling back. For the first time in his adult life, Calvin felt powerless. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought started to whisper, maybe I made a mistake. But pride would not let him say it out loud. Not yet. It was nearly 3 years after the divorce when Calvin saw her again. He had just finished a temp job delivering office supplies and was driving down a street he had not taken in years. That was when he noticed the sign, Sacred Ground Wellness. The name rang a bell, but it was not until he parked and peered through the window that he saw her, Ayanna. Her hair was styled in a twist out, her body grounded and fluid as she guided a class through a deep breathing sequence. She looked peaceful, strong, unbothered. Calvin stood there frozen, watching her smile softly at the women around her. He could not reconcile it. This was not the woman he had left. This was not the woman he told would be nothing without him. He stood outside until the session ended. When she stepped out to grab water from the hallway cooler, she noticed him. Their eyes met. She did not flinch. She did not smile. She simply nodded once, a quiet acknowledgement, and turned away. And for the first time in Calvin's life, he felt something he never expected to feel around Ayanna again, shame. Calvin could not shake the image of Ayanna standing in her own studio, calm and in control. That night, he sat in his dim apartment, scrolling through the studio's basic website. It was simple, just a few pages, soft colors, a short bio. No photos of herself, no grand mission statements, just the words, a space for women to breathe again. That line hit him hard. He thought about all the times he had cut her down, told her she was not ready, that she did not have what it took, and now she had something real, something he had not even known she was capable of building. He did not sleep much that night. His room felt too quiet, too empty. The next day, he walked into Sacred Ground Wellness under the pretense of trying out a class. He stood near the back, hoping she would not notice. But she did. She did not say anything, though. She greeted the room like she always did, warm, grounded, welcoming, but not to him. She looked right through him like he was no more than another body in the room. And for the first time, Calvin understood what it meant to lose access to something sacred. After the class, Calvin lingered. He watched women offer thanks and soft smiles. He saw the way they looked at her with respect, trust, even affection. That used to be him, or at least he thought it was. When the room finally emptied, he approached her slowly. "Ayanna," he said, unsure if she would even respond. She turned, her face unreadable. "Calvin." Her voice was calm, not cold, but not inviting either. He cleared his throat. "I did not know you started a business." She tilted her head slightly. "I did not think it was worth mentioning. According to you, I was not capable of much." The truth cut deeper than she probably intended. He tried to explain himself, fumbling through excuses, work stress, miscommunication, the pressure of being the only earner. She listened without reacting. When he finished, she simply said, "You made your choice. I made mine. I have worked hard to build this, Calvin, and I did it with no one saving me." He nodded slowly, his shoulders sinking. "You look happy." Ayanna offered a small smile. "I am. For the first time, I truly am." And with that, she walked past him and into her office. Conversation over. Calvin left the studio feeling like a ghost. Everything about her energy felt final. Not cruel, but firm. He realized he had come there hoping to reconnect, maybe even start over. But there was nothing left for him to claim. Over the next few weeks, he kept thinking about her words. "You made your choice. I made mine." The line repeated in his head every time he filled out another job application, every time another door closed on him. He had spent so many years trying to control Ayanna, but now he could not even control his own circumstances. His savings were nearly gone, and the freelance gigs were not enough to keep him afloat. His phone, once filled with messages and dinner invites, now sat quiet. He had never known real loneliness before. He used to think power came from having someone depend on you. But now he was the one in need, and no one was picking up. The more he sat with it, the more he realized it was not just that he lost Ayanna. He lost a version of himself that she once believed in. And without her, he could not even recognize the man in the mirror. Ayanna did not think about Calvin much after that encounter. She had too much on her plate. Her sessions had doubled. Her client list had grown, and she was now mentoring a young woman named Jada, who had just come out of an abusive relationship. Guiding others gave Ayanna more than income. It gave her purpose. She remembered what it felt like to be small, silenced, and scared. So, she created a space where women could leave those feelings at the door. But every now and then, Calvin's face would flash in her mind. Not as a threat, not even as a memory to grieve. Just a lesson, a chapter closed. Her therapist once told her, "Forgiveness is not about letting them back in. It is about letting yourself move forward." And she had. Ayana had forgiven herself for shrinking, for waiting too long to leave, for believing his words more than her own voice. Now her voice led women to their own healing. She did not need to hate Calvin to prove she had healed. She did not need to confront him again. The life she built spoke louder than any argument ever could. But life has a way of circling back. One cold November afternoon, as Ayana was closing up the studio, she saw Calvin sitting on the steps outside, his jacket thin and face tired. She hesitated, but stepped closer. "Are you all right?" she asked. He looked up slowly. "I lost my apartment," he said. "I am staying in my car." Ayana stood there, torn. He did not ask for help directly, but the plea was in his eyes. She did not feel pity, just a sharp, distant ache. She thought about offering money, a phone number to a shelter, something. But instead, she sat beside him for a moment, the cold concrete grounding them both. "I used to wait for this moment," she admitted quietly. "Back when I was still hurting. I wanted you to suffer the way I did. But now that it is here, I do not feel what I thought I would." Calvin looked at her, ashamed. "I was wrong. Ayana, you were not nothing. You were everything. I just did not see it." She stood slowly, brushing her coat off. "I know, but you were not ready to see it, and I was done waiting for you to." Then she walked inside and locked the door. That night, Ayana sat on her bed with a blanket around her shoulders, sipping tea, staring at the empty space on her wall where she had once hung a photo of her and Calvin. It had been gone for over 2 years now, replaced by a canvas print of ocean waves, steady, deep, unapologetic. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jada. "Thank you for tonight." I felt safe again. Ayana closed her eyes, letting the warmth of those words wash over her. She did not need Calvin to validate her anymore. His regret was not her healing. His downfall was not her revenge. She had done the work, day by day, quietly alone. And now she had a life built not on someone else's approval, but on her own perseverance. That truth brought more peace than any apology ever could. She did not need Calvin to disappear to move forward. She simply needed him to no longer define who she was. And now, finally, he did not. He was just a man from her past, one she had outgrown. Calvin did not come back to the studio again. Ayana was not sure if he left town, found a shelter, or would try to start over. And she did not chase the answer. She let the chapter end on its own. Her focus returned to her women, those who came in shaking, tired, unsure of themselves. One woman, Kiara, broke down during a session, sobbing into her mat. Ayana knelt beside her and whispered, "You are safe here." Later that night, Kiara told her, "You remind me I am allowed to exist, that I do not have to earn air." That sentence stayed with Ayana for days. She remembered when she, too, had felt like a burden, like Calvin's patience was the only thing standing between her and nothingness. But now, her very presence reminded others of their worth. Not because she was loud, not because she had power, but because she had survived and built peace from the ashes. Her life was no longer about proving anything. It was about protecting the space she had bled to reclaim. That was her power. Quiet, rooted, undeniable. A year later, Sacred Ground Wellness expanded into the adjacent space next door. Ayana hesitated before signing the lease, unsure if she was ready. But Ms. Trina, who had remained a close mentor, came by with a homemade cake and a card that read, "Stretch wider. Your roots can handle it." And so she did. The new space allowed for counseling rooms, small group sessions, and meditation corners. Ayana hired 2 part-time instructors, women who had once attended her park sessions. The studio buzzed with new life, but the energy remained the same, soft, warm, real. One evening after locking up, Ayana stood in the middle of the room barefoot, breathing in the scent of sandalwood and lavender. She thought of the woman Calvin once called nothing, that woman who used to flinch when a door closed too loudly, who doubted her every thought. That woman had been quiet too long. Now Ayana was in a place where women found their voices again, not through fame, not through noise, but through breath, through stillness, through choosing themselves. Over and over. One rainy Sunday, Ayana visited her mother's grave. She had not been in months. She brought fresh white lilies and sat on the bench nearby, umbrella balanced between her knees. "Mama," she whispered, "I wish you could see me now." She told her about the studio, about Shanice and Ms. Trina, about the women she served. And yes, she mentioned Calvin briefly. "He came back for a moment," she said softly. But I did not let him stay. A breeze stirred the trees as if offering quiet approval. You always said love should not make you disappear, Ayana said, her voice cracking. You were right. She sat there for a long time, letting the rain mist her face, letting the silence answer back. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter. Not because the grief was gone, but because she no longer carried shame with it. She had loved, she had lost, and she had risen, not once, but over and over. And that resilience, quiet and powerful, was something no one could take from her again. Later that evening, Ayana returned home, lit a candle, and settled on the couch with her journal. She flipped to a page she had written 3 years ago, the night Calvin handed her the divorce papers. The ink was smudged from tears, the handwriting shaky. Maybe I am nothing. Maybe he is right. She stared at the sentence for a long time. Then slowly she wrote beneath it, I am everything I need. I am the woman I fought to become. She closed the journal gently, no dramatic tears, no swelling music, just a quiet exhale. She had built her life in silence with no crowd watching. She did not need to go viral. She did not need applause. Her healing was not for show. It was for her. And now, when she walked into her studio, into her home, into her own mind, there was no echo of Calvin's voice, only her own. Strong, clear, whole. The following spring, Ayana received a letter. It was folded neatly in an envelope with no return address, postmarked from the city. Inside was a short handwritten note in Calvin's familiar script. I do not expect you to write back. I just wanted to say I was wrong. You did not need me. I needed you, and I did not realize it until too late. I hope you are still thriving. You deserve that. She read it once, then again, and set it aside. Not because it did not matter, but because it did not hold weight anymore. She did not feel triumph or bitterness, just distance. His words, once so heavy, now felt small. She placed the letter in a drawer, not to keep as a token, but because it did not belong in the trash either. It was proof of something finished, something she had survived. She made no plans to respond. Some closure does not come from conversation. It comes from knowing you have moved on without needing the final word. That same week, Jada led her first beginner's yoga class at Sacred Ground. Ayana watched from the back of the room, heart swelling with pride. Jada, once uncertain and quiet, now moved with grace and strength. After class, she turned to Ayana and said, I would not have made it here without you. Ayana smiled and shook her head. You made it because you chose to show up. I just held the door open. That is how Ayana saw her work now. Not as a savior, but as a witness. She created the space, but the healing was their own. Every woman who walked into her studio carried her own story. And Ayana honored that. She no longer tried to rescue or prove anything. She simply made room for truth, for growth, for breath. And in doing so, she made room for herself, too. Her life was no longer about escaping Calvin or proving him wrong. It was about fully becoming who she was always meant to be. Shanice came by for dinner that Friday night, bringing her loud laugh and a bottle of wine. The two women sat on the floor eating takeout and reminiscing about the early days. Do you remember how you used to cry, folding up that futon? Shanice teased. Ayana laughed, covering her face. I was broken. Shanice raised a glass. And now you are whole. To healing. They clinked glasses, the sound soft and real. Ayana knew she would not be here without Shanice's quiet shelter. Without the hard floor that first felt like freedom. Every piece of her journey mattered. The heartbreak, the hunger, the slow rebuilding. She had not skipped steps. She had felt it all. And because of that, she had earned every bit of joy she now held. Not loudly, not publicly, but deeply. That night, as she crawled into bed, she whispered a quiet thank you to the darkness for the pain, the growth, and the strength to keep showing up for herself. Weeks later, while leading a meditation circle, Ayana asked the women to place one hand on their chest and one on their belly. Feel your breath, she said gently. That is your power. It has always been yours. She closed her eyes with them, breathing in deeply, grounded in her own rhythm. She no longer rushed her days. She no longer waited for approval. Her calendar was full, but her spirit was spacious. Each session reminded her of how far she had come, not just in business, but in self-trust. She did not need perfection. She did not need applause. She needed peace. And now she lived in it. Her story did not end with Calvin's letter or his regret. It did not even end with Sacred Ground Wellness. It continued every time she chose herself. Every time she opened her door to another woman searching for air. Ayana no longer chased wholeness. She was wholeness. And no man could ever take that from her again. One evening, as the sun set behind the studio windows, painting golden streaks across the floor, Ayana stood barefoot on the mat alone. She stretched slowly, arms reaching upward, spine tall. Her breath was steady, her heartbeat calm. She looked around at the space she had built from nothing. Not from fame, not from followers, but from silence, grit, and prayer. And she whispered to the woman she used to be, the one who had trembled beneath Calvin's words. You were never nothing. You just forgot your name. The studio was quiet, but inside her there was music, gentle, powerful, and entirely her own. And as the last light faded into dusk, Ayana smiled to herself. Not because she won, but because she remembered who she was. And that was everything. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.